Wirecard was Europe's most valuable fintech, a €24 billion apex predator for PayPal. From the deep end of the internet, taking care of shady businesses traditional banks were terrified to deal with, to Germany's favorite tech champion. They had prestigious clients, and it was even more valuable than Deutsche Bank itself. But it was 100% fake, or at least 50%. Just enough to fool auditors for 11 years, just like Enron, one of the biggest fraudsters in history. And once the mask fell off, the company became worthless in 96 hours, leaving an absolute mess behind. One man orchestrated this illusion. He convinced an entire nation he was a genius, Europe's own Steve Jobs. He bent regulators and auditors to his will. He made politicians protect his lies. He terrorized journalists for 5 years. And now, only he and his partner know where the missing €2 billion are. But how do you build such an empire with such a basic lie? What was supposed to be cutting-edge AI-fueled payment processing was actually handled with Excel spreadsheets. At BlackLine, we automate accounting with AI. We consider that technology has to be transparent. Everyone should be able to understand what it does. Wirecard is the ultimate snake oil story, but you'll discover how one journalist's simple question brought down what's now known as Europe's Enron. Let's go back to 1999. The internet is still the Wild West. The worlds of online gambling and adult entertainment are exploding, and traditional banks want nothing to do with any of it. Too risky, too controversial, too complicated. Enter Wirecard, a small German company that says, we'll handle the payments nobody else wants. And it works beautifully. While Visa and MasterCard charge 2 to 3% for normal transactions, Wirecard charges 10% for these high-risk businesses. The margins are insane because the competition doesn't exist. Banks are too scared, regulators don't understand the internet yet, and customers are desperate for solutions. This is legitimate business. Morally questionable? Maybe. But legal, profitable, and filling a real market need. 2002. The dot-com crash has hit everyone hard, and Wirecard is bleeding money despite its profitable niche. The company is almost bankrupt. That's when Markus Braun, a young Austrian accountant, takes control. Braun has a vision: transform this unsexy payment processor into something respectable, something that can compete with the big players. His first masterstroke comes in 2006. For just €5 million, Wirecard buys XCOM Bank and gets a banking license. Suddenly, they're not just middlemen anymore. They control the entire payment chain. No more depending on partners, no more sharing profits. They can offer everything: payment processing, banking services, currency exchange. But Braun thinks bigger, much bigger. Between 2011 and 2015, Wirecard goes on a spending spree across Asia. The logic seems sound. Capture the booming Asian markets where mobile payments are exploding, and regulatory oversight is lighter. €500 million for dozens of acquisitions. Companies in Singapore, India, the Philippines, many bought at suspiciously high prices. Internal legal teams start raising red flags about irregular structures, missing documentation, and what seems to be inflated valuations compared to minimal actual operations. Corporate structures in these Asian entities are deliberately opaque, so due diligence reports come back incomplete. But Braun ignored the red flags. To him, it was conservative thinking that will kill growth. So legal team members who push too hard find themselves reassigned to other projects. Because by now, Braun has perfected something more powerful than technology: storytelling. Wirecard is now much more than a simple payment processor. It's a revolutionary fintech, the future of commerce. It uses artificial intelligence and machine learning to predict consumer behavior. Now that's cutting edge, right? The German press eats it up. Politicians line up for photo ops. Wirecard joins the prestigious DAX 30 index, rubbing shoulders with BMW and Siemens. From internet porn to German prestige in 15 years. The transformation is complete. But it's more than just prestige. By 2020, Wirecard powers the financial lives of millions of Europeans. Challenger banks like N26 and Curve use Wirecard's infrastructure. Thousands of companies issue Wirecard expense cards to employees. E-commerce merchants across Europe process payments through Wirecard systems. They've become the invisible backbone of European fintech. When people and companies pay with their modern digital bank cards, they're actually using Wirecard technology, but none of them know it yet. They don't know that this success story is already hiding something much darker, because those Asian acquisitions weren't just overpriced, they were completely fake. Wirecard claimed it couldn't get payment processing licenses in every country, so they needed local partners to handle transactions on their behalf. They called this strategy third-party acquiring. On paper, it looked sophisticated. Wirecard would send money to these Asian partners who would process payments for merchants, take a small fee, and send the profits back to Germany, a global network of technological corporation. In reality, it was the oldest trick in the accounting book, round tripping. Money leaves Wirecard, does a few loops through shell companies, and comes back as fake revenue. 3 companies generated 50% of Wirecard's total revenue. Al-Alam Solutions in Dubai, Sinjo Group in Singapore, PayEasy in the Philippines. Combined, they supposedly processed over 1 billion euro annually. Al-Alam was the crown jewel. Wirecard claimed this Dubai partner processed 350 million euro per month on their behalf. But when journalists visited Al-Alam's actual office, they found 6 employees in a cramped space above a restaurant, just a few computers and a printer. The senior executives listed in the official documents didn't exist. A simple front operation far from being a sophisticated payment infrastructure. But nobody asked these basic questions for years. Why? Because Wirecard had perfected the art of technological intimidation. Every investor call was filled with buzzwords. Machine learning algorithms optimize transaction flows. AI-powered risk assessment engines. Proprietary blockchain implementations. The more complex it sounded, the fewer questions people asked. Internal presentations showed dashboards with hundreds of metrics, real-time global transaction maps, sophisticated predictive models. It all looked incredibly advanced. In reality, the core accounting was done on Excel spreadsheets. Revenue numbers were manually typed in. The AI algorithms were basic if-then statements. Complex equals sophisticated, right? Plus, Jan Marschalek was an Austrian math genius who spoke 6 languages and claimed to have graduated from elite universities. He would dazzle investors with technical presentations that they did not fully understand, but were too embarrassed to question. Asking simple questions like, "How does it work?" or "Can we have a look at the transactions?" suddenly made you sound like an idiot. Everyone was too busy being impressed by the innovation to ask if any of it was real. Not the auditors from the major firm who certified the accounts for 11 years. Not the German financial regulator, BaFin, who called Wirecard exceptionally well managed. Not the investors who poured billions into the company. You'll see in a sec how laughably basic the fraud actually was. Yet, it fooled everyone. Well, except one skeptic guy. Dan McCrum is a British journalist at the Financial Times, a forensic accounting specialist, a guy who can smell phony business when he sees one. In 2015, he made one little simple observation. Payment processing is a low-margin business. Even giants like PayPal struggle to maintain healthy profits. But Wirecard's profit margins were impossibly high. Billions in revenue flowing through local partners that nobody could identify. Explosive growth in markets in Asia where Wirecard had no visible presence. How? How so? From that alone, McCrum couldn't sleep anymore. During 4 years, he kept asking the same simple question. Can you prove these transactions actually happened? Can you imagine what it's like being alone against an opaque 24 billion euro giant corporation? That's a real-life movie, and this quest for truth would eventually consume his entire life. They sent private detectives to follow him through London streets. They hacked his email accounts, searching for anything to discredit him. Anonymous accounts spread lies about his personal life across financial forums. Expensive lawyers sent threatening letters almost daily. McCrum started checking over his shoulder when he walked home. He varied his routes, He told his editors he felt like a target. But when you ask basic accounting questions and the response is a private army, you know you're onto something massive. The breakthrough came in 2019. A Wirecard insider had the courage to leak 70 gigabytes of internal emails. McCrum spent weeks reading through them, barely leaving his desk. His colleagues found him at 3 a.m., surrounded by printouts, obsessively highlighting passages with shaking hands. He had them cold. Wirecard executives admitting to each other that their Asian partners were fictional, fake contracts being created in real time as auditors asked questions. Marshalik himself ordered a panicking Singapore employee to hide the truth. The auditors want bank statements from our partners. What should I tell them? Tell them it's confidential. If they push, we'll provide samples. So McCrum started to publish the stories, increasingly damaging. Wirecard's stock started to wobble. Investors began asking the questions Wirecard had desperately tried to avoid. But instead of investigating these allegations, the German authorities did something pretty desperate. They protected Wirecard. Europe's tech hero can't possibly have faked their genius. The Financial Times is conducting market manipulation against a German champion. So BaFin, Germany's financial regulator, banned short selling of Wirecard shares. They literally made it illegal to bet against Wirecard while refusing to investigate the fraud allegations. German politicians lined up to support Wirecard. Chancellor Angela Merkel personally lobbied for the company during state visits to China. Wirecard was too important to Germany's tech reputation to be allowed to fail. It was McCrum versus the system on his own. Even the whistleblower had to flee the country after receiving death threats. But McCrum saved his best for last, and that final piece came from the most unexpected place. In late 2019, he published the most devastating story yet. He had traced Wirecard's money flows through the Philippines and discovered that the local banks had never heard of the company. The supposed 1.9 billion euro sitting in Filipino accounts didn't exist. Not missing, not misplaced, simply never existed. The walls were finally closing in, and that's when Wirecard made their final desperate gambit. In October 2019, Wirecard hires another auditor for an independent audit, confident they can fool one more firm. Worst mistake of their lives. Because it was KPMG, and they did not just look at documents. They called the banks, visited the offices, and asked for real proof. The documents are in Singapore. Our partners need time to prepare. Confidentiality agreements prevent immediate disclosure. Every excuse in the book. 8 months later, KPMG delivered their verdict. We cannot verify the existence of 1.9 billion euro. The money never existed. June 2020, the empire collapses in 7 days, from 24 billion euro to bankruptcy. Markus Braun is arrested at his Munich villa. The visionary CEO becomes a pathetic figure in court, just a scared accountant whose fantasies spiraled out of control. He gets 15 years in prison. Jan Marshalik vanished to Russia with 2 billion euro. Years later, he's still the most wanted man in Europe, living as a fugitive with the only real money from this entire charade. The institutions that enabled this disaster face embarrassment, but little real consequence. Convenience made them unable to see the truth. Those who should have protected the public got away with excuses while the innocent suffered. Neobank cards relied on Wirecard's infrastructure, so they were declined at checkouts. Hundreds of thousands of customers across Europe suddenly couldn't buy groceries, pay bills, or access their money. Online payments failed, and merchants couldn't process sales. Corporate employees worldwide are stranded with frozen Wirecard expense cards. In the UK, regulators immediately froze Wirecard card solutions. Similar chaos erupted across Europe as payment systems collapsed overnight. On top of that, over 20,000 individual investors, ordinary families, retirees lost their life savings. German mums and dads who trusted that a company on their country's most prestigious stock index with clean audits and government support was a safe place for their retirement funds. Institutional investors watched 25 billion euro in market value evaporate. The European fintech ecosystem implodes as investors flee anything connected to payments innovation. Legitimate startups with real solutions get shut down because nobody wants the next Wirecard. An entire generation of financial innovation dies from collective trauma. This is the cost of complexity without transparency. When companies hide behind sophistication, discourage questions with jargon, and attack critics instead of answering them, this is what happens. Real innovation should not fear scrutiny. Technology should serve human oversight, and companies should work on making it more understandable. At BlackLine, our AI shows exactly what it's doing, and the automation it provides actually makes accounting clear. Finance teams use it to get a clearer vision. They're not burying their responsibility under a ton of tech jargon. Sadly, another master storyteller made its way to the top in 2025, and it caused another massive destructive crash. And it came from Europe again. Did you hear about this $1.5 billion fake AI startup scam? We covered it in this video. Go watch it.